Actor, singer, poet, and Hellraiser. Richard Harris was all these things and more. A man who grabbed life by the scruff of the neck. He became an international star in the 1960s with his Oscar-nominated performance in This Sporting Life. The 40-year career that followed had highs and lows, but very few dull moments. Harris had the gift of the gab, loved to tell a story, and adored an audience. Here he is in sparkling form on The Parkinson Show, talking at first about an audition to get into drama school.
I remember so funny. I was in Hyde Park and I was as nervous as anything. It was an afternoon. I had an audition at 9. No, I had an audition at 4 in the afternoon. And there I was in the middle of Hyde Park saying, I must rehearse this piece now here correctly. And there was an old man sitting down at a bench reading a newspaper. And Harris was going around the place, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York, and walking around the trees, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death, out our brief candle. And there was this little fella sitting down with his newspaper, looking up like that. That's crackers. So after a couple of minutes, my first intercourse with who? My first...
We'll talk about that later.
With police, in the bar. My first intercourse with the police was then. And I was going on, and all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death, out, brief candle. You all right, lad? I looked up, and there's a policeman over. You all right? I said, yes, thank you very much. It doesn't sound too good, does it? So I dashed back, I got into the academy, and I saw a little man standing at the door with glasses. And I dashed up. And I was now an hour and a half late. That was it. I missed the time and a taxi, and I finally got to the academy. And there was a little man there with glasses. And I said to him, oh my God, I said, quickly, take me to Michael McCorn, who was the principal of the academy. And he said, I am Michael McCorn. And I said, good, you've discovered me. You see? So then he said, the academy was full, he'd said. I said, you must take me. I said, because I have checked out the record of your academy, and you haven't had one success. Not one success out of this academy yet. Now, I am going to be the first success. So if I were you, I'd make a little place for me in there, and I'd do it. So I went in and did my auditions, and I got in. Years later, I met dear old Michael McCorn again, and we did a little drink. And I said, what was that audition like I did? He said, well, can I tell you? Truthfully, he said, it was the worst audition that I have ever sat through. And I said, why did you take me in? And he said, I took you in because any man with the gall and the cheek to stand up in front of examiners and to perform as badly as that has got to be a success.
When you said that to him, when you sort of blagged him on the stairs there, I mean, did you really mean what you said? Were you?
I did. I was certain.
You were certain. How can you be that certain, Richard?
Well, I think one has to think positively. Think thin, or think young. It hasn't done me any good. But however, I think you think positively, it will happen. And I remember, I tell you, that tomorrow, you were mentioning before, we were chatting before, that tomorrow. It reminds me of a great story in the dressing room upstairs. That tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of Joan Littlewood's theatre.
That's right, and you worked with her.
And I worked with Joan for years. And she was really, everything I know, or whatever I'm supposed to know about acting, I learned it from this marvelous lady. But I was in Macbeth, and finally, after sort of being in the company for quite a bit and playing little parts here and there, she finally said, well, you have a good part now in Macbeth. You're going to play Ross in Macbeth. I said, oh, fabulous, wonderful, wonderful. So she said, so anyway, Shakespeare, I thought, me, Shakespeare, this is it. You see, this is really it. This is what I've been waiting for. So I wrote to all my friends in Ireland. I said, you must come. Harris is doing Shakespeare. We're going to show the English how Shakespeare should be performed, right? Come, I said, everybody come, mother, father, children, brothers, aunts, uncles, the rats from the firm, anything, the mice, all comes. Bit out there in the front. So, indeed, the stones of Ireland opened up and relatives appeared from nowhere. And they flocked to Ireland, to theatre workshop. And Harris said, I was going home, like I had only about 4 lines in it. 4 or 5 lines in the play, right? I had 4 weeks to rehearse 4 lines. That, without being a mathematical genius, is 1 line a week, right? Right. So Harris is learning his 4 lines, going home with the train, going home with the bus, going to Hyde Park thing, these 4 lines. I was going to be sensational. Anyway, came the opening night, and Harris had to stand back here and make an entrance with 2 other people. In between it, I had to walk down, say these 4 lines as best as I could, wave my arm, go off, and it was a modern version of Macbeth, and half the army go off stage right. With Harris, you see. So Harris is learning his lines, and suddenly he's standing at the back, and he's all dressed up in his uniform with his baton in his hand. He had to pull out his sword and do this to the audience, you see. So I stood back, and I'm ready to go, and I hear everybody sort of doing their lines, and I'm saying, everybody's watching me. We always think that, you see. Everybody's looking at that wonderful, who's that fella back there at the back with the stuff? Nobody was watching Macbeth or Lady Macbeth. It was Harris at the back, you see. Marvelous, marvelous. So anyway, Harris goes on. Q is about to arrive. Can you follow me with the camera? This is a true story now. And the Q is about to arrive, and I'm standing back like this, you see, waiting with my little sword and my spear, and I'm ready. And suddenly my cue comes, and I take out the sword, and I rush up to the front of the stage, I stick out the sword like that. And I can't remember a line. Not a bloody line. And I could hear my mother out front say, "Isn't he marvelous?" It's true, I swear. I haven't got up yet. How am I going to get off? How am I going to get off? How am I going to get off? So I picked up the sword like that, and I look at all the audience, and I went, and off. I didn't know how long. Oh, dear.
That's the real definition of mother love, that, isn't it?
No, absolutely.
Only a mother could love that. Yeah. The film that I suppose you would look back on with, apart from probably one other with most regard, and that was Sporting Life, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you enjoyed making that movie?
I loved it, yeah. I loved it. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was a tough movie to make, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it because those fellas up there, I had to train. I took the, I take my own work extremely seriously, despite what my reputation in the press and my private life is, which is kind of Rabelaisian and that. But I take my career seriously, and I went up to, Leeds, Wakefield, and I studied there with the players for about 3 or 4 weeks, yeah. and all that, and tugged out with the second team. Hard.
They are hard men, aren't
Oh,
they?
yeah. Absolutely, because I remember once Sorry, go on.
No,
Go on.
Is that the kind of society that you like, that you admire?
Well, I find that I don't like actors very much.
Don't you?
No. I think the only actor ever to come into my house was Connery, who I like Sean. I don't like them very much because they, the usual cliche about actors, they speak about nothing else, but themselves, normally. What am I doing here all night? We're talking about myself.
You've been asked to.
I've been asked to, yeah.
That's right.
The actors always say, I know it's an old cliche, but it's quite true when they say, let's not talk about me, let's talk about you. What did you think of my last movie? It's true.
Well, that was an entirely different society, and a very sort of masculine-based
Well, I
society.
prefer that. I prefer most of my friends are the musicians, and people who have worked extremely hard to get there, people who've come from different kind of backgrounds. And I think you always get a better sort of, a better relationship with people when they have come from not the sort of, when it's tough, when their family life was tough,
yes.
and their parents had to work hard, and they've had to work hard, and they kind of respect and the achievements are more palatable, I think, than when
Yes.
you have to, when
Yes.
things are made too easy.
Did you know, though, Richard, when you did The Sporting Life, that it was going to make you the kind of, it really made you critically at least, didn't it? Made you into a big star.
Yes.
Did you realise that when you were
I didn't.
making it?
No, not really at all. I just remember the hardship of making it and working with Lindsay Anderson, who was a fantastic director, and Rachel Roberts.
She was marvellous. Wasn't she? Let's remind ourselves of that. And it's a sequence where you, Frank Machin, have just signed on for the club, and you've got the cheque in your pocket. You go back to tell her about it.
That Johnson called earlier on. That friend of yours.
I've just seen him.
I mean, he's been waiting all this time. It was hours ago.
He likes to get out and about a bit.
You should have friends your own age.
I have. They've signed me on. Didn't you hear what I said?
Yes. You'll be pleased.
So will you, and you guess how much it is.
I don't know anything about it.
Go on, have a guess. Just guess how much you think I'm worth.
Threepence?
Oh, careful, careful. You made a joke. You can't go on cracking jokes like that. You know you might do yourself an injury. Oh, come on, have a guess. Come on.
No.
Well, I better tell you since you're so keen. £1,000.
Oh. You're a great ape.
You don't believe me? Look, I've got the check here in my pocket. £1,000 in letters and in numbers. Signed, sealed, and delivered, Frank Mason. They drove me home in their car. A bloody Bentley.
It's very good.
You don't sound very excited about it.
It's a bit more than I got when my husband died.
Well, isn't that right bloody handsome of you?
You didn't have to do anything for it.
You mean I didn't have to get killed for it?
Some people have life made for them.
That's right, Mrs. Hammond, and some people make it for themselves. It's about time you took that ton of rock off your shoulders. And don't wake me in the morning, I might be dead.
Well, Machin, of course, in that film was essentially a sort of violent man, wasn't it? It's one way he sort of expressed himself. I mean, are you violent, Richard?
Only when I'm picked on. No, I don't. Well, yes.
Which is it to be, yes or no?
Well, I suppose that I try to avoid trouble, you know, as much as I can. But when it comes, you know, I like to walk away from it a lot, not because I'm a coward. But in fact, I am. I'm a converted coward. That's it, at this stage of my life. But I think that, you know, one gets into these rows and the press build them up, you know.
Yes.
And they.
But, I mean, how do you get into them? I mean, is it always happen that people pick on you or what?
Well, either friends being insulted or I'm being insulted. I remember sort of one row. What was it? I was thinking of. Oh yes, the row that I was at the Talk of the Town.
Oh yes, the
Sammy Davis row. We were there at a party, and there was some fella sitting beside us, and he took an instant dislike to Sammy. And Davis was kind of a friend of mine, so I just asked him would he keep quiet. We were enjoying the show, and he kept on again. He kept on. I kept saying, listen, honestly, we are enjoying the show, you know. So he kept on, and he called Sammy some more things, and I took the law into my own hands and hit him with it.
Can we have a look at those bloopers of yours?
All right.
Before we roll them, I should explain to people at home that, in fact, what Richard's done, and this, in fact, was part of your concert tour as well, when you come back. People seem to think they see the finished product at home of a movie, that it's all been done first time, and in effect, many, many takes go into making a scene, creating a scene. And what you've done, basically, in this is you've shown what can go wrong.
Right. I collected them for my children, really.
Yeah.
You know, because I show a movie to my son or something, and they look up and I got 3 boys, and they look up and they think, "Oh, you're marvelous, Dad." You know, and this is the bad way to bring up kids, having any kind of this aura about your father. I've seen too many actors' sons in the motion picture business being destroyed by the image their dad has and the success. Right. So I wanted to show the kids that, you know, your dad isn't all that bright or good. So every time I made a mistake in a movie, a genuine mistake, I collected them, and I put them together. And when I'd show my son that particular movie, they'd look up at me and say, "Oh, you're marvelous, Dad." And I'd say, "Well, wait a second, I want to show you something else." And I'd run them all the mistakes I made, you see, and then they'd look back, and the look was never so adoring. I mean, the lights went up. They said, "Oh, that's so bright, Dad, all right."
Right. Well, let's roll it now, then. And then you'll talk us through it, Richard.
Okay.
Yeah, fine.
I think the first one is A Man Called Horse. Do you see A Man Called Horse? Well, the first one is A Man Called Horse. And to get the part in the movie, the producer said to me, "Can you ride a horse?" And I said, "Of course I can ride a horse. All Irishmen can ride horses, for God's sake." So I thought, how super. Look, it's the first day shooting. There's Harris in horse, riding superbly. And all the directors and producers are totally relieved at my... There we are.
That's marvellous, isn't it? Oh, that's so slapstick. The next one we're going to look at is something from...
Yes, Man in the Wilderness.
That's right.
This again is the correct version. This is the perfect version you saw on the screen. Then we'll show you a mistake. This is toward the end of the movie, and he finds this rabbit with a broken foot, and he tries to make a splint for the... Look how the rabbit puts up the broken foot to be mended, look. Now, that's the perfect version. Now, here's Harris's improvisation here. This is the first take. I don't know what the hell I'm looking for in there for a start.
What's the next one, Richard, coming up?
The next one is also from Wilderness. This is the very beginning of the movie when, I don't know if you've seen it. You should see it if you haven't seen it. It's a marvelous movie, I think. And by the look of things, nobody saw it. No, but here's the beginning when he's attacked by a bear, you see. And the day shooting, the producer said to me, don't you think you ought to go and have a look at the bear? And I said, no. I thought I was valuable and they wouldn't put a huge bear on me, right? Now, this is the perfect sequence that you see that happened in the movie.
This is the...
Now you saw that was the good version. You weren't supposed to laugh at that. Now, here's what happened when Harris didn't look at the bear and they released him. Better than the movie.
That's some of them are better than the movies, aren't they? Yeah.
As Harris said in that interview, despite the joking around, anyone who thought he didn't take his acting seriously would have been very mistaken. He could be totally committed in his approach and preparations, as he reveals here, talking about his title role in the 1970 film Cromwell.
Richard Harris, Cromwell. I see that, in fact, physically you're playing in warts and all, but
Yes.
are you, in fact, playing in warts and all?
What does that mean?
Well, in other words, are you playing him as hero?
I don't think that's the one thing that I sort of strove to avoid in the script. I think that the audience at the end of the movie should be able to. I think we should have a split audience at the end if the movie is going to be successful. I think we should have half the audience saying the king was right and half saying Cromwell was right. But the interesting thing about Cromwell was that how little the English really know of the true man. Indeed, the Irish and the Catholics as well. But I think that he was a much maligned man in England history, as in English history, and that over the past, I don't know, years, it's been my ambition to play him since 1959, when I got this script first, and got Irving finally to do it. I was studying his part for a couple of years, off and on, and I've sort of discovered that the legend of Cromwell was built out of royalist propaganda. And now the people are beginning to uncover the truth of the man, the greatness of the man, which is interesting. I read that Prince Charles, in fact, in one of the newspapers some weeks ago, said that he was brought up to believe that Charles I was a marvelous man and that Cromwell was a sort of hypocritical monster. But now, on the studying of the parts and the period, he reversed that opinion, which is interesting enough.
Talking about the way you're playing it, in 1963, I think, when you did Diary of a Madman on stage, you played very much larger than life. You were not a little person playing a little part in little ways. Are you playing Cromwell larger than life?
It's difficult to answer that question. I think that I have studied the part very carefully, and I have read the Carlyle book on his letters and his speeches. And they were quite dynamic, and people's opinions of him, which were quite extraordinary. That he had a tremendous power, but he also had a great gift of disappearing in company. That for quite a while you wouldn't sort of remember who he was. But then when he had a point of view to say, he said it with tremendous economy of words and with great power, and the one sort of remembered him after. So I'm trying to get that into the part. And also the man himself, he was a great family man, loved his family, loved the farm, and loved wine, loved good music. He was a locksmith by hobby. And all these things are interesting enough to get underneath the man. I think it's very dangerous if one goes overboard. Acting techniques are extraordinary. I think that the technique that one uses on the stage is far different than what one would have to use in cinema. So one has to keep back a bit.
But you've gone to considerable lengths with this part. For example, I know that you've quite deliberately broken your voice.
Yes, I thought that my voice was too light for the part. And also that there were so many powerful speeches in it. And I didn't think my voice had that kind of strength. Also, it was against Guinness's voice, which is terribly light. I thought the best thing I could do was to sort of break it. So in Spain, the first day in Spain, I went on top of a mountain and screamed and roared for 2 hours. And now every day I do voice exercises to keep it like this, which means I've ruined my recording career, but there we are.
But isn't it in fact very dangerous to do this? I mean, isn't there a danger that you might lose your voice entirely?
I never think of the future. I think of the present, and it's right now for this part, and that's the most important thing to me.
Can you afford to do that?
I mean, financially or physically?
Financially and physically.
Well, if financially, I suppose I can't record again till October, till this movie finishes. I'm hoping to get my voice back. If I don't get it back, then I'll lose a certain amount of revenue from the recording world, but I won't miss it very much.
You could also lose certain kinds of part, couldn't you? If your voice
Well,
didn't
I won't.
come back.
Well, yes, I suppose I'll have to go on playing Cromwell all my life.
True or false, you've acquired the reputation of being something of a hellraiser. Now, how much of that is a newspaper fabrication, would you say?
Well, I'd be a terrible hypocrite if I said it was all. I think really, I do live, must say, a rather hectic, wild life. I get very restless if I'm in one place too long. But some of it has been over-exaggerated, I think. My God, I shouldn't say that. I don't know, really.
For example, recently in a Sunday newspaper, there was a report of a sort of continental jet plane binge that you took, which lasted several days.
Well, it wasn't really, because you see, then again, you see that the story that was finally printed was the story that the readers of that particular newspaper would only want to read. But in fact, it was a terrific trip. It was, despite the fact that there was a large variety and a large scale of things that we did, they just took an aspect of it. I mean, Wolf Mankiewicz, who was very brilliant and very bright and very marvelous guy, I think. And we had the most fantastic discussions about religion and politics and poetry and sex and man's place in the world and the woman's place in the world, the woman's place in the man's life and vice versa. Which, you know, had it been maybe another newspaper, it would have taken on a whole different thing. That would have taken probably the sort of primary aspects of the trip. But because that particular newspaper chose to take an aspect of it. But I can't deny that any of the reports on the newspaper were not true.
There are always stories, too, about you're not getting on too well with some of your co-stars. People like Charlton Heston,
Yes.
Marlon Brando, Kirk Douglas, although I believe he's supposed to be quite a good friend now.
Yes, he is. He is.
Are you difficult to get on with, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask people, you'd have to ask certain actors or certain directors about it. I remember John Huston once said, or wrote about me, he said that the next time he hears a director say that Harris is impossible, he knows that director hasn't done his homework. I can't stand people who don't do their homework. I take it very seriously when my profession or the thing that I'm in at that particular moment, and I can't stand any kind of sort of incompetence or mediocrity. I think upsets me quite a bit. When I find people don't really take it seriously, I get quite upset.
The intolerance expressed there didn't fade with age. Years later, in 1999, Harris got so upset with one director's treatment of his performance that it made national news and became a major talking point at the Cannes Film Festival.
The stars came out for Cannes' first night. Guests at the opening ceremony included Claudia Schiffer, along with Holly Hunter, director David Cronenberg and Faye Dunaway. Cannes is the one festival the celebs love attending. But not for one star. According to the posters, The Barber of Siberia stars Richard Harris and Julia Ormond. After the opening celebrations, the photographers were all over Julia, but Richard stayed away in protest. What was a headlining role has, in his opinion, been savaged into a guest appearance.
I won the Cannes Film Festival in 1963. I won it for Sporting Life. And having won it and to go back yesterday to find that I'm starring in a picture with Julia Ormond, and I sit there in shock that I'm actually barely in it.
Directors here in Cannes were, however, less than charitable.
It's only human to be annoyed that you put so much work into something and your part has been, you know, cut down. On the other hand, I understand the film's like nearly 3 hours long anyway, so probably the first cut was 4.5 hours, so someone should be cutting it, you know, and if you're going to cut something, I should imagine like a Richard Harris performance might be the first place that you go, in my opinion.
It's very sad. I mean, it is a very long film. It goes on for hours and hours and hours, and you do sit there wondering where Richard Harris is, and he's really little more than a cameo.
At the time of the controversy, Richard Harris's wild days were well behind him, with health problems diagnosed in the early 80s, forcing him finally to call time on the years of heavy drinking.
What can you now not drink?
Oh, I can't drink alcohol.
What can you now not eat?
I can't eat sugar or salt or oil, anything like that. It's a terrible bore, isn't it? No. Well, you drink, don't you, little?
I drink a little. I just had a wee nifty one before I came on.
Did you?
Only a small one.
I wish I had that too, because I'm not allowed to do that anymore. I got this hypoglycemia thing, and of course it rushes through you, and you can collapse and go into a state of shock and all that kind of thing, so I have to be careful.
What have you had, for instance, today? What have you had to eat today?
Oh, today I had rice. Every morning I have oatmeal, big bowl of oatmeal, and a banana. And then, not terrible, and then for my lunch I had rice, and then today I had nothing for my dinner. I'd probably go back and have rice and oatmeal mixed. You know, I mean, it's terribly dull, isn't it, dull? I mean, you were getting green even listening to me. It's awful.
And you just can't vary that diet?
Oh, I can, yeah.
Well, look, how old are you? You're 49, aren't you?
Yeah, thank you.
You're 49.
Can I come back? It's great.
And you eat a lot of rice.
Yeah.
And you do Camelot 420 times so far, and you're going to do it a lot more times now. Now, how do you get kicks?
Why? Well, it's boring. I mean, it's very dull. It's dull to go into a bar and ask, what kind of water have you got?
Yeah, but how do you spark up your life? I mean, now, at the age of 49, I've said it 3 times now. Peak of your career, it says here. Yeah. You know, we've gone through all... You're at the top of it, and you're doing your opening in 3 weeks' time. When you go home at night, how do you say to yourself, or do you say to yourself, God damn it, that's another day, what am I going to do? What am I doing here?
Yeah, you do. It is tiresome. I get a thrill out of doing the show, of course, and you've got to find different kinds of means to elevate yourself. It's getting used to doing a different sort of thing, and I don't smoke grass, and I don't coke, I don't do any of that, so I'm really sort of very dull. I have really found out that, you know, Richard Burton and I met 2 years ago, and we were talking about our lives, we drank so much, and we sort of sat back and we thought, you know, how boring people are. Now we don't drink. Everybody who drinks around us, they're so dull. We say, were we that dull?
As he dried out in the 1980s, Richard Harris's cinema career appeared to have dried up too. He stayed away from films for years and enjoyed several stage successes. One of these was the 1990 production of Henry IV, which coincided with the triumphant movie comeback with The Field.
Well, it's lovely to see you again.
Thank you.
You've always been one of my favourite screen actors, and you've just completed a new movie, I believe, with the team who are behind My Left Foot.
Yeah.
No. Why has there been such a long absence? Why have you not
Well,
made more
I
films?
gave up making movies 8 years ago. I tell you when I gave up. Now, I know you're going to have some good remarks about this, because I can trust you, John, to come back very quickly. My last movie with Bo Derek. Ready?
I'm not going to say a word, Richard. The stage is yours.
Well, it was called Tarzan and the Ape Man.
I know, I remember that. I did
remember
see
that?
What a cracker.
Yeah, what a cracker. And what happened was I found myself on the very first day shooting. It was a 44-day shooting schedule, and I found myself writing in my diary 43 days left. I thought, what am I doing that for? I mean, why am I wasting 43 days? Why am I wishing 43 days to pass? Yeah. So I said, that's the end. And I haven't made a picture for 8 years. This script came called The Field, very impressively written by Jim Sheridan and directed by Jim Sheridan, who did My Left Foot. And it was an astonishing script. And they asked me to play a small part in it. And I said, no. And they said, just let us use your name, if you can just play this 3 or 4 day part. So I kind of read the script, and I said, not only will I not play the small part, but I'll play the lead.
I want to do the lead in it. And they didn't want me, may I tell you. because when they suggested me to Hollywood, they said, Richard Harris, is he still alive?
And I also said, did you see him in Tarzan the Ape Man?
And so at the end of it, I got it. And I've just seen it. And I know there was a thing on the paper last week about my being disappointed by it. When I saw it, I was kind of a little disappointed because I find this interesting. Great movies are made by great men, right? And it was Jim Sheridan's second picture. So this great director made a great picture, but he listened to ordinary people how to put it together, and it became an ordinary film. So I persuaded him to go back, to trust himself, to go back to the original structure. He's done that, and it's massive.
And when will that be out, do you?
Well, it opens the New York Film Festival at the end of October, and then it'll open here around November. But I will say this, honestly, and you know how I decry I'm my greatest decrier of my work. I say, good God, it's awful, don't go and see it. I think it's one of the best 25 pictures ever made.
Well, I will look forward to seeing it, as I'm sure everyone else will.
Have you seen Henry IV yet, the play?
I haven't seen Henry IV, but I know I promised you last time we met. I will come Tuesday night, perhaps. I'll be there. I know you've got to dash off now because you're appearing on stage this evening doing it.
We'll go... what time are you?
Well, it doesn't matter. We've got to get rid of you anyway, because we've got other guests. That was just me being polite, frankly. You know, they're waiting. All right, it's, as always a pleasure. Mr. Richard Harris.
Thank you.
His performance in The Field earned Richard Harris a second Oscar nomination and gave his career a second wind. The Unforgiven and Gladiator were just two huge hits he appeared in. And of course, there was his final role. His granddaughter said she'd never speak to him again if he turned down the role of Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films. I'll keep doing it as long as I enjoy it. My health holds out and they still want me, Harris said. But, he added, the chances of all three of those factors remaining constant are pretty slim. Sadly, he was right. His death at the age of 72 came a fortnight before the premiere of the second Potter movie. Playing Dumbledore meant he'd secured his place forever in the affections of a new generation of filmgoers. And to those who enjoyed him in his prime, he will always be a true force of nature and an unforgettable screen presence.